Hey, welcome back. We are on chapter 10 of On the Heavenly Spheres, a treatise on traditional astrology written by Helena Abelard and Luis Ribeiro. We are on page 153, starting with Orientality and Occidentality. Here we go. These conditions are also defined by the position of the planets in relation to the Sun. A planet is oriental when it rises in the sky before the sun because at that time it is visible to the east, the Orient. And when it rises after the sun, it is occidental because it will only be visible in the west, Occident, after the sun has set. This concept is probably as old as astrology itself and derives from the direct observation of the movement of the planets. The first interpretive, excuse me, The first interpretive prehistoric techniques were based in large part on this type of relationship between the planets and the sun, determining oriental and occidental planets. Because horoscopes may have the sun in any position and not just on the ascendant, new students may encounter difficulties determining orientality and occidentality. Most important is to remember that one's point of reference is always the relationship of the planets to the sun, and not the position of the sun in the houses. Thus, to determine the position of the planets, imagine that the sun is rising over the horizon conjunct the ascendant. This establishes an imaginary horizon that divides the chart into two parts. The planets that are above this imaginary horizon are oriental, and those that are below are occidental. To help visualize this, you can turn the chart. The oriental planets, those that precede the sun, were envisioned as spear bearers of the Star King, signaling the vitality of a new day. Thus, an oriental planet was considered to have masculine characteristics, giving it a more direct, outward, and assertive manner. On the other hand, occidental planets, which follow the sun, were envisioned as the entourage that follows the solar court. Solar court. Occidental planets exhibit feminine qualities, expressing themselves in a more discreet, contemplative, and withdrawing manner. Note that these qualities must be added to the characteristics of the planet that the planet acquire when they via their positions by sign, house, etc. I'm going to read that sentence again. Note that these qualities must be added to the characteristics that the planets acquire via their positions by sign, house, etc. There is little point in interpreting them independently. The superior masculine planets, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars, are strengthened when oriental in position because they have their masculinity reinforced. On the other hand, the inferior feminine planets, Venus and Mercury and the Moon, are strengthened when occidental by position because this position reinforces their feminine natures. I have two questions. What about night sect versus day sect? Mars being up the night team, and then also Mercury is common, being can be both depending on whether it's rising or oriental or occidental or night sect. Okay, I'll start reading. The orientality of masculine planets and the occidentality of feminine planets repeats the order of their celestial spheres. Repeats the order of the celestial spheres. The superiors are above the sun when oriental because they rise before him, but while the inferior planets are below the sun when occidental because they rise after him. When the natural order of the celestial spheres is repeated in a horoscope, the planets are in their idealized positions in relationship to the sun and therefore strengthened. Mercury, a neutral planet, is a special case. Contrary to the others, all of which have a defined gender, masculine or feminine, Mercury's gender is determined by its position in relationship to the sun. It is considered masculine when oriental and feminine when occidental. So they answered one of my questions. That's cool. Orientality and occidentality also has the effect on the primary qualities that characterize each planet. Depending upon the planet's position in relation to the sun, one of its primary qualities is emphasized. Thus, Saturn, normally cold and dry, tends to be colder when oriental and drier when occidental. Oh, so it's acting on one primary quality. Um, when oriental, it tends to acquire some humidity, therefore moderating its qualities. Jupiter, hot and moist, gets hotter when oriental and wetter when occidental. Mars reinforces its heat when oriental and its dryness when occidental. And just like Jupiter, Venus is hotter when oriental and wetter when occidental. Mercury also increases its heat when oriental, but occidentally reinforces its dryness. The moon, because it's a luminary, follows a special rule explained later in this chapter. Practice examples for orientality and occidentality. In the chart of Flora Espanca, which you turn back to page 151, you'll see it in chart 3. In the chart of Flora Bella Espanca, there are 3 oriental and 3 occidental planets. Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter rise before the sun, so they're oriental. In terms of strength, orientality favors Jupiter and Saturn, and occidentally favors the moon, occidentality. The same might be said of Venus if this state was not nullified by its excessive proximity to the sun, combustion. In the case of Mars, which is dignified in this chart in rulership and angular, occidentality merely removes the capacity for assertiveness from it. The leadership of Mars is still felt, but it is colored by hesitation and doubt. Because Mars is in the 7th house, this situation tends to be experienced in the areas of relationships, especially in her tumultuous marriages. By being oriental, Mercury acquires speed and vitality in this horoscope, although it is considered to be favored in occidentality because it's an inferior planet. Other orientality concepts. There are other planetary classifications with regard to orientality. These are based upon the placement of the planets in the hemispheres and quadrants of the chart, and not on their relationship with the sun, as in the previous cases. This classification is known as Orientality el Mundo. According to this concept, a planet is oriental when it is in the east in the oriental quadrants, 12th, 11th, 10th, 6th, 5th, and 4th houses. In occidental when in western quadrants, which is the 9th, the 8th, and the 7th, the 3rd, the 2nd, the 1st. I bet that flips. Like yeah, because like when I was writing, I had to write everything backwards. So when I just did all that, yeah, backwards. Flip it. The classification is used in different contexts and has no relationship to the concept of orientality in regards to the sun described here. All right. Let's see. Do we do a short one? Now we got this. The condition of the moon. Due to its status as a luminary, the moon's dynamic relationships are different from other planets. It shares with them the same conditions, orientality, combustion, etc., but also has its own characteristics, velocity, amount of light, and others that make it unique. The lunation cycle. At the root of the moon's dynamic interaction is its unique relationship with the sun. Because it's the fastest planet, it is the moon that sets the pace of that relationship. The sun-moon cycle has 4 distinct phases. The first, known as the first quarter, begins with the conjunction of the lights, that is the new moon, and lasts until the square, the first quarter. During this phase, the moon gradually distances itself from the sun's rays. Because its visibility increases, it is said to be waxing in light. The second quarter phase follows, which begins with the square of the lights and ends in the opposition, which is the full moon. In this case, the moon, which is increasing in light. Yeah, first quarter to opposition is increasing. Yeah. The moon, increasing in light, reaches the point of its greatest distance from the sun. The third quarter phase lasts from the opposition to the next square, last quarter. After it has attained its greatest distance and brightness, the moon begins once more to approach the sun, and its visibility, which is still great, now begins to diminish. It is said to be waning in light. The fourth quarter phase begins with the square and ends at the new conjunction. In this phase, the moon loses a large part of its brightness and continues to wane in light until it is conjunct the sun and is no longer visible. Each quarter extends for approximately 1 week, totaling a complete cycle of 29.5 days. That is a lunar month. And just a side note, if you think about this, the moon is like 27 something point some 3 days, but that extra little 2 days is the movement of the sun, where the sun has moved from the last new moon to the next new moon. So when you take the full cycle, when it gets back to that same point, the moon has moved, so you have to take that little extra time to get to where the sun is then. So a complete lunar cycle from new moon to new moon is 29.5 days. The primary qualities of the moon are altered as it travels along the course of its cycle. Although its natural essence remains cold and moist, the various phases add slight shades of heat and dryness to it. In the first quarter, the moon appears hot and moist, which gives it a sanguine temperament. The heat remains in the second quarter, but the waxing light adds a dryness to it, thus producing a choleric temperament. With the decrease in light of the third quarter phase, the moon cools but retains its dryness, producing a melancholic temperament. In the last phase of the cycle, the moon recovers its moistness, which will combine with the cold, producing a phlegmatic temperament. For deeper interpretation, the moon's temperament is combined with the characteristics given to it by its sign position. While the position by sign indicates the general attitude, its position by phase, temperament, defines the manner in which it is externalized. For example, a Taurus moon, which is oriented towards security, stability, and comfort, earth plus fixed, will have a different expression according to its lunar phase. If it is a choleric, hot and dry phase, this need becomes more dynamic and urgent, actively seeking security. If it is phlegmatic, cold and moist, the search has a more passive and expectant tenor. Be still, don't make waves. And the conditions for security will eventually come to the native. In the general interpretation of the nativity, the moon's signs and its phases are considered together with other factors to determine the individual's character. This determination is crucial in the overall characterization of an individual. Now, orientality and occidentality of the moon. In the waxing phases, the first 2 quarters, the moon is occidental to the sun, so this phase is considered hotter and therefore more dynamic. In the waning phase, the last 2 quarters, the moon is oriental to the sun and therefore colder and more withdrawn. Determining the moon's phase. First, look at the position of the sun. From this, note the points to which the sun emits rays for the opposition and the 2 squares. Pew, pew. If the moon is positioned between the point of the conjunction and the first quarter in the direction and the order of the signs, it is in the first quarter. If it is between the square and the opposition, it is in the second quarter. If it is after the opposition but before the second quarter, second square, which the sun's rays are emitted in directions contrary to the order of the signs, the moon is in the third quarter phase. If it's between that square and the conjunction, it is in the fourth quarter. The transition place of the moon's phases are points of exact aspects. For the divisions into quarters, no orbs are used. For example, in the chart of Florabella Espanca, the sun is at 16 degrees Sagittarius. It emits an exact opposition to 16 Gemini, an exact square to 16 Pisces, the first square or opening square, and 16 degrees Virgo, which is the second square or closing square. The moon is at 15 degrees of Aries, therefore located between the first square of Pisces and the opposition in Gemini. It is therefore in the second quarter, which corresponds to a caloric temperament, hot and dry. In this case, the naturally dynamic and impatient attitude of the moon in Aries, fire plus cardinal, is exacerbated by the moon's choleric condition. In another example from the chart of King Sebastian, the moon is positioned right after the opposition, and because the second square and before the second square. It is thus in the third quarter. This phase corresponds with a melancholic temperament. The need for assertiveness and self-recognition, characteristic of the moon in Leo, fire and fixed, acquires a more rigid and controlled expression due to the melancholic temperament of cold and dry. So, what phase is your moon in? And yeah, I am a disseminating moon. I'm in the third quarter. So I think I'm just past the trine, but definitely not approaching the square yet. Okay. See you in the next chapter. Thanks.